You're listening to Uproar, a podcast of the Akron Zoo that gives listeners a behind-the-scenes look at the zoo, our amazing animals, and the dedicated people who work here. With your Uproar hosts, Zach Berkey, Randy Thomas, Sam James, and Elena Bell. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Uproar.
Welcome to Uproar. For this week's episode, we are joined by Carlos, who is our Director of Conservation. Carlos started recently in the spring of 2024.
Tell us about what you do at the Akron Zoo. What does a conservation director do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, as a Director of Conservation, my job is to ensure that we do what we say we're doing in terms of saving animals and in terms of ensuring that we have a place for animals to thrive and a place for humans to enjoy that nature. Because conservation itself is it's a word that's actually hard to define. If you talk to a conservationist, what is conservation? We say it's making sure that organisms, plants, animals, and other living beings have a place to thrive in nature, and that we keep that ecological balance so that they can, make it as a species. But it's much more than that. Conservation is our daily actions, is what we do and how we do things. And my job in here is making sure that, again, we do that.
Wow.
It's hard.
It's deep.
It is.
It's a lot of work. Deep. Before coming to the zoo, Carlos, what's a little bit more of your background? Like, where did you come from before you came to the zoo?
From a cave.
From a cave.
So you know Sam?
Yes.
The primordial cave.
But I guess my journey began 20-some years ago when I moved from Puerto Rico to the United States to get to study amphibians. Honestly, all I wanted to do back then was just be out in the woods and play with frogs. And one way to do that was to go to grad school, right? Because if I finish my undergrad, get my degree in biology, and start working in an office or whatever, then that's going to kill my dream. So I got this, I was able to, just like I did at Akron Zoo, I was able to convince this professor in Missouri that I was a great candidate for his department. And I began studying amphibian communication biology, which basically, when frogs are calling, it's males trying to find a mate. So studying the aspect of that behavior and that ecology, the evolution aspects of that, why are males calling? Why do a male prefer to fight with another male as opposed to trying to get the lady? And because frogs are that, they're a little feisty and they like to fight.
Who knew frogs were such a soap opera?
Oh, they are. They are the real drama kings of the animal world. Because you can have a frog that just calling normally, and you play back another male call, and it's just going to fight the speaker. And so studying the evolution of that behavior. But slowly that changed into the realization that I was studying these frogs. Great tree frogs are super common in the U.S., in the Midwest and other parts. Other amphibians were not doing too good. So it was that switch from studying ecology and communication and the evolution of how those behaviors occur. So I was studying all that, that ecology and like questions about science. I realized that there's more than that. So I slowly switched to working with amphibian conservation as opposed to just they're studying their behavior and evolution. And that happened around the time where zoos were really promoting that kind of work and in amphibian conservation. It was 2008, the year of the frog was a big thing in AZA that year. The Amphibian Arc, which is mainly a group of zoo conservationists and also other conservationists working to save amphibians in zoos, within the populations in zoos. So I switched again from that side of amphibian ecology and communication to amphibian conservation. And I've basically been doing that ever since, whether at other zoos or at other non-for-profit organizations and education centers, and now back in the zoo world.
Was there anything amphibian-wise that really drew you to the Akron Zoo?
When I was studying amphibian communication and ecology, one of the folks I met, the National Wildlife Federation, which is where Frog Watch used to sit 20 years ago, maybe, a long time ago. And I did help that original phases of Frog Watch with the calls of the frogs of the southeast of the U.S. because it was becoming a national program all over the country. And then, when you go to the southeast, that's where you have most of the species of frogs and toads. So just selecting the right call for the right, for the species. And again, this was 20 years ago. So this was before it was so easy to just Google a frog or Google anything, right? So trying to get those calls in a database so that training protocols could be developed. So that's what was my extent of knowledge of FrogWatch when I was in grad school. Then when I joined the professional career at the zoo, in this case at Philadelphia Zoo, I was also able to be part of FrogWatch. So knowing that one of the options that I had was a zoo where FrogWatch now sit, and that I would be an integral part of making sure that FrogWatch continues to exist, was definitely amazing. It was a big draw, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, let me first ask, too, what exactly is FrogWatch?
I had a colleague that used to say FrogWatch should be renamed to Frog Listen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually what it should be called. But again, FrogWatch, in terms of a catchy name, it's from the same concept of bird watching or watching as in paying attention to. Because what people do at FrogWatch, it's really community science. It's really an opportunity for folks to be out in the woods and be out in wetlands, places where people may or may not go usually, but definitely go at hours and time of the years where you're usually not out in nature. Because what we do with FrogWatch is we select different sites throughout where you live, throughout different areas, where we know or we expect amphibians to show up in wetlands to breed. And by wetlands, it could be a river, it could be a pond, a lake, private property if you have permission to enter that property, or public lands. Again, if you notify the people that manage that particular area, it doesn't matter if it's public or private, you have to notify whoever runs the place. You notify them that you're going to be there, so you show up with your friends or volunteers and you start listening to what frogs are calling, what toads are calling, because it could be either frogs or toads. And again, like I was discussing earlier what was my interest in nature and biology, so amphibians, or in this case frogs and toads, they call to attract mates. Mm-hmm. So you can listen to them as they're calling, of course, and that's one way of assessing the health of a population, not only if the animals are present, when throughout the year, but also how many and where. And it's one way, again, of us identifying or notifying their presence in nature and seeing if with the years, if we can pick up on trends of is the population changing its dynamics. You know, do we have less individuals, more individuals that are calling earlier in the season, mm-hmm. later in the season. And you can sometimes, pinpoint if a particular change in that calling behavior happened. Does it coincide with a new development being built behind this wetland or changes that you can then trace to policy or actions that, even though it's not necessarily scientifically validated, it is one way of showing that the changes that occur in nature.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I know spring peepers and chorus frogs are doing just fine. Amphibians, mm-hmm. They're slippery, they're sassy. Why are they important?
Oh, yes. Well, because they're slippery and sassy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we got to have them. The cat call.
Yeah, no, so amphibians they're important because of many reasons. First of all, the word amphibians, amphibios, dual life. They live on land and live on water, which really doesn't apply to all amphibians, but does apply to most amphibians, right? Most frogs and most toads and a lot of salamander species, they live on land and then they lay eggs in the water. And of course, those eggs then develop into larvae, whether tadpoles or polywogs, however you want to call it. Then they develop in the water and then they emerge as little baby froglets, toadlets, baby salamanders. And in ecology, we call that nutrient transfer because you have an animal that's living on land laying eggs in the water, which is nutrients for animals that eat eggs. Then out of that egg, a little animal hatches, in this case, a tadpole, that's going to be feeding on whatever food they find in the water. And then out of that tadpole, again, once it becomes a frog and emerges from the water, all the nutrients that they ate in the water go back to land. And if you eat, you poop. Mm. And when you poop, you still have nutrients in that undigested food that you ate, and that becomes part of fertilizer or nitrogen and carbon, phosphates, and other nutrients that plants and fungi can eat. So it's one way to recycle nutrients in nature, and frogs do a good job of bringing nutrients from land into the water and then nutrients from water into the land just by eating and pooping, right? But other than that, everybody eats frogs in nature. So birds eat frogs, raccoons eat frogs, fish eat frogs, and by frogs I mean frogs, toads, and salamanders, and even frogs eat frogs. So and reptiles and snakes. So they are also, I guess, the breadbasket of the natural world in a sense.
Obviously, thanks for your explanation on why obviously amphibians are important to our ecosystem and our conservation initiatives. But like, what can we do as regular people, citizen scientists, outside of volunteering for Frog Watch? Is there anything that we can do, or what's the biggest reason why they are threatened in the wild?
Yeah. So amphibians in general are threatened mainly because of pollution and habitat destruction. What we do in the land always ends up in our waterways, and amphibians depend on those bodies of water to lay eggs and reproduce. Amphibians are also considered the canary in the coal mine. One of the things that makes amphibians special and different from other animals is that all animals, whether you're talking about birds, fish, reptiles, and mammals, our skin is protected by some physical barrier. I mean, humans, we're actually the exception because we have a CC skin. Most animals and most mammals have a tough, leathery skin and have a big, thick coat of fur that protects them physically from the outside world, from injury, from the sun, from the heat, from the cold. Likewise with the feathers of a bird and the scales of a reptile. But amphibians have mostly and sometimes only a chemical barrier. And that's why they have a permeable skin. An amphibian can actually technically breathe through the skin. They literally have a drink patch in their belly. They sit in the puddle and pick up water through their belly as opposed to drinking it.
Wow.
Which makes it unique, right?
Yeah,
but then if that water is contaminated, they're going to just drink up those pollutants and then they will die. Which is why amphibians, and not all species, but a lot of amphibian species are the first to go when the water conditions are not right. And of course, if water conditions are not right for an amphibian, they're not going to be good for a human either. So that makes them, again, a good indicator of the quality of the environment. So everything we do, from pesticides, from herbicides, from using too much road salt in the wintertime, especially in this part of the country, affects amphibians. And also the pollution from factories and just grease from a restaurant. So everything we do, the things that we have to do to ensure that we have a healthy amphibian population are the same things we have to do to ensure we have a healthy water supply. So protecting amphibians is protecting our waterways. And how do we do that? We do that by preventing runoff into the street, water runoff. So ideally having the right kind of landscaping in our homes. If you own a home with a lawn, try to change that lawn or minimize that lawn space, and then have a more natural setting, more natural wildflowers, which will protect the water that runs out of your lawn, and at the same time provide habitat for pollinators and for birds and for other wildlife that are not necessarily amphibians. So even if you don't like amphibians, protecting amphibians and helping them helps the wildlife that other people might like.
We're going to take a quick break and play a fun game, Carlos.
Nice.
So here at Uproar, we'd like to call it 10 questions. Okay, how it will work is you will ask us 10 yes or no questions in order to determine what animal we are thinking about. But since it's usually 20 questions, I will tell you we are thinking about a type of amphibian.
Nice.
And Carlos, a caveat here is we are not experts on animals, so we reserve the right to kind of do fact checks and Google searches in real time if you ask a question that we don't know the answer to.
So, okay, Carlos, are you ready?
Yes.
All right, go ahead and ask away.
Does it have warty skin?
Yes.
Does it have short legs compared to other amphibians?
I'd say yes.
Does it have bright colors or dull colors?
I'd say bright. I mean, kind of a mix of both.
So, yes, it is. It's
like a hybrid. It's got like green, brown, and blackish.
Okay, so I guess the next question. If you can see, or if you've saw the hands of this animal, does it have webbing in the hands or no?
I don't think it does.
No.
So it's definitely a toad. Okay, so warty skin, short legs, no webbing in the hands. That's, does it have a tail?
No.
So then, yeah, it's most likely a toad. What species of toad? It depends.
I will give. So obviously, here at Uproar, we reserve the right to make amendments and adjustments to our game.
Yep.
Well, we're going to give you another hint. So
Okay.
we reserve the right to give you hints here. This animal is in the southern hemisphere.
In the southern hemisphere. So, because I was going to say it could be a Panama golden frog, but then that's technically the northern hemisphere, so no. Animals that it could be then that also have no webbing in their hands, and depending on who you asked, it could be warty, would be certain kinds of poison frogs, which are not toads. Again, their own thing. And it's a fun thing because I should have mentioned this earlier. So, is the animal also found in zoos or in nature?
It can be
Is
found in
this-
zoos,
I'm
yes.
sure it's
Okay,
found in
yeah,
zoos.
yeah.
It's a pretty popular animal.
It is
So-
definitely found at least one zoo.
And is that the Akron Zoo? Because then it could be a tomato frog.
It is not.
No, it is not.
I will say also, just to give you another hint, this particular animal is in South America.
Yeah, so that's why I was going with, I guess the other option would be, I mean, you just narrow it down to like 1,300 species.
I mean, I don't know how many frogs and toads are in
'Cause
Africa and
yeah,
Australia
yeah,
or
no,
Southeast
that's the thing,
Asia.
'cause
There's some out there.
It's somewhere in the most densely
mentioned-
populated.
yeah.
area
So
of the
so
world.
I mentioned Panama golden frog because I was thinking harlequin toads already, and I mentioned again that one because it is the most famous in zoos, right? But they are a true toad in the toad family, and they belong to the Arlopus genus, which is over 90 species of toads right there. But then with those colors, you mentioned it had green and black,
and brown.
And red and
brown
yellow.
and red and yellow. So in terms of a general description, yes, I would stick with harlequin toad.
Nope.
But you say no. Okay, so
Here, I'll give you a hint.
wait, that's it.
Okay. All right.
He's got it.
He doesn't want a hint.
Here's the thing, though. It could also be a horned frog with the colors you just mentioned, and it's kind of like camouflaged in the look it has. It's one of those like a hamburger patty type frogs.
All right, you're getting somewhere.
Yeah, and because the other species in that group, I mean, just horned frogs in general, Ceratophorus is the genus. About 5 of those
Sure.
species. Yeah, that's the genus. Yeah, because they have this little horn above the eyes.
I was going to say it if you didn't.
Yeah.
So.
I'm looking at it right now. It is Ceratophorus.
There you go. Yes. Yeah. And but then the species, that depends, because if it's in Ecuador in the Pacific coast, it could be Stolzmanni, but that doesn't have that many colors as you're suggesting. And then the most common one is Ceratophorus cornuta, which could be that one. But then that also comes in all colors and fun things because it's also so common in the pet trade.
Mm-hmm.
And the
What's-
Pac-Man frog would be the common name.
That did it?
Kind of.
Kind of.
But it's like, it is the colloquial name for it. Like, it
Yeah,
is-
common names, exactly.
Yeah,
So
it is the
Ceratophorus
pet
is
shop.
the genus.
It is
yes.
the pet shop name for it.
And then, depending on the species, the pet shop name could be Pac-Man frog, horned frog, and then it goes, there from other names.
But what kind of horned frog are we thinking of?
I'm thinking Ceratophorus cornuta because that's the most common in the pet trade.
Okay, so what
What about Ceratophorus ornata?
That would be the other one.
Actually,
which is-
you got it. Pac-Man
Yeah, it is
frog
the Pac-Man
is
frog.
one of its names.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
That's what I was saying. I was like, it is Pac-Man frog. He said it a
Yeah.
while ago. I was like,
Yeah.
I think it is correct.
Oh,
but
okay,
we
okay.
were just looking for the specific Argentine horned frog. We've covered a lot of bases here in Uproar, but there's things we just don't know about. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to speak on something we didn't touch upon that you think is worth mentioning. Any kind of conservation effort or something that's worth highlighting.
Yeah, I guess, we all know frogs are cool, frogs are awesome, and they're amazing, and we want to save them, but we're also trying to save the general biodiversity that we have here in Akron, in Summit County, and in Northeast Ohio in general. And we're doing that by working with local partners, and by local partners, I mean anything from Cuyahoga Valley National Park, from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, Division of Wildlife, from Summit Metro Parks, and from the Akron City itself, trying to conserve not just the animals that live in here, the plants that live in here, but the entire ecosystem and habitat, and trying to preserve our waterways, because again, like I mentioned for amphibians, but also applies for everybody else, good water is good for all of us.
Like the otters?
Yes.
So they could save Molly the otter?
We could be saving otters if we save amphibians, because
You got my vote.
Otters eat frogs, right? Have you seen that little cute video of the otter eating a frog?
I have.
Yes.
I have.
And the picture?
Cute video.
Yeah.
Cute.
It's a cute,
I mean-
adorable video of the otter eating a frog.
Yes.
It wasn't cute for the frog,
I know.
but I enjoyed it for the otter.
They're
They serve a
both
purpose.
doing their job.
Yes.
And that's cool.
And again, I am an amphibian biologist, and I recognize that frog's job is to feed the world. But anyway, yes. So we're trying to also protect the landscapes around us. To try to save birds, pollinators, and just the wildlife that we have in here in general. I know we're done, but I do have a question for you all.
Okay.
Why do frogs say ribbit?
Do they?
Isn't that the way?
I mean, technically.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say because the English language, like?
Yes and no. It is because of. It
Or
is
do they
because-
say something different, like with Spanish speakers, or?
Like the
It
onomatopoeias
depends.
differently?
The who? Yes,
Okay.
it depends, but that's exactly why. So when a lot of frogs, like for example from Puerto Rico, and our most famous frog is the coqui, which is just the onomatopoeia of how the frog calls. But we call the frog by the way we think the own frog is making their call. So coqui frogs make coqui sound, right? They go coqui, like peepers, peeps, right? So it's in that same concept. The reason why frogs say ribbit is because about 100 years ago, this guy in Hollywood needed wetland noises, wetland sounds and night sounds, and he just went to a ditch nearby or whatever studio, recorded was sounds of the night, and came back, and he happened to record the Pacific chorus frogs,
Wow.
which are the only frog, and like 5 or 6 in that group, that when they call, sounds like ribbit, ribbit. But it's actually a very fast-paced call. Being audio geeks and people that like to mess with sounds and stuff like that, they slowed down the call, and now it says ribbit.
Yeah, it's like
And-
a long, drawn out.
Yeah. Yes, and because it's Hollywood, that's the one noise that got picked up, and that's what frogs say.
Wow, that's
Each
really funny.
species, each species has its own call because that's
Right.
what males use to attract females. So females are basically fine-tuned like a radio, to pick up that particular frequency or cadence of sounds.
Yeah.
So they have their own channel for communication.
And I mean, and if you get into Frog Watch, you'll learn that every frog and toad kind of sounds way different than you
Yeah,
expect.
100%.
Like I thought that the bong, like the sound of the banjo, was a bullfrog, but it is not.
That's a very interesting fact, Carlos. I'll have to add that to my repertoire of the fact that red-tailed hawks are making the sound for bald eagles in movies.
Yep.
And that tigers are actually roaring for lions in movies. Hollywood just likes to change everything for animals. So I'll have to add that to my fun fact about the ribbit.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't know that.
Thank you for joining us today at Uproar and educating us more about frogs and toads and amphibians and why they're actually cool and not just sassy and slimy. So thank you, Carlos.
Thanks, Carlos.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Carlos.
Uproar is a production of the Akron Zoo, produced by Vince Jeffries, scheduling and recording by Zach Berkey, sound mixing and editing by Caleb Morgan, researchers Zach Berkey, Randy Thomas, Elena Bell, and Sam James. Uproar is a weekly podcast with new episodes every Thursday. For more information on the Akron Zoo, visit akronzoo.org. For more information on Uproar, visit akronzoo.org/uproar.